Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series, where we take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video will be reviewing the player supplement Playing Dead, designed by Steve Fidler, with Alex Tanner, Andrew Teha, BornToDoStuff, Caitlin Bradbury, Elias Garoufalias, Heavyarms, Israel Moreira, Proph, Rain-Junkie, Ryan Miller, Ryan Rose, and Yorviing for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or Discord, or on my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy my content, consider using my affiliate links for online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. So, when a player character dies, you usually have two options. You can either revive them with the player's own access to spells, or drag their corpse to the nearest temple and pay the money, or you can roll a new character. Playing Dead offers a third option, which is, what if you wanted to transform that character into an undead version of themselves? It's a really cool idea, it's a neat concept, and this is an extremely comprehensive player-focused supplement that includes new class replacement features, transforming you into your undead self, entirely new subclasses that you would then remove your current subclass and take this new subclass if you really wanted to embrace your undeadness, as well as new spells, new feats, and new adventuring gear. Basically everything you need to play, run, and enjoy your undead character. This is such a cool, fun idea, and it's so well designed that I'm instantly starting to picture, what if you just built an entire campaign around your party, instead of meeting in a tavern, you wake up in a graveyard and you're all undead player characters right from level 1. And it includes the fact that, hey, you can obviously use this as a way to transform your characters to kind of save them from, death and make them into an undead version, or you could just create a level 1 undead player character and they're just that cool. It includes an introduction which features, there's not really rules for becoming undead so much as, hey, you're dead now, and here's the new Undead Stats, which of course it borrows what's already in the stat blocks for monsters. But it's more about the role-playing features, like what does it mean to be undead, and obviously the differences between, does your character have a past history, what befell them to kill them, does that then change how they act and feel as they are undead? Did you want to become undead, or is this some kind of curse that befell you and now you hate being undead but you're still going to make the most of it? Like, what is the process here? What is your motivation for being undead? And it's a lot of really cool information. There's also an extra little bit which is incredibly neat. I don't know if I would actually use it in my games, but called Greater Undeath, which essentially allows any of your player characters to transition into what we would normally think of as high-powered undead villains and bosses, including like liches and vampires. So if you straight up want to embrace that, and I believe the idea was as inspiration for prestige classes. In other words, this is something that is not designed to be done at level 1, but maybe further on down the line in your player character's undead career, which would be pretty crazy. But I mean, once you maybe make it to a certain level, like 15 or 16, kind of all balances off anyway, so maybe let them just go nuts at that point. But it's really fun that we get a lot of rules like that, and there's a lot of them that's a high-powered undead threat, so we'll take a look at that as well. Honestly, even if you don't have interest in undead player characters, because obviously that's kind of a big deal to introduce into your world, undead most likely exist anyway if you're playing D&D, but maybe not necessarily undead player characters. But these subclasses are pretty damn cool and fun, to the point where you could, with just a little bit of tinkering, and I believe it mentions this somewhere in the book, you could just allow somebody to take these subclasses as a subclass supplement without necessarily being undead. Instead, they could just be, obsessed with death or into necromancy and all that. And again, just a few little... Now, granted, some of these would not transition more than others. Like the Barbarian, literally, one of the subclasses is you're ripping off own pieces of your arm and just beating people over the head with it, which is fucking hilarious and awesome. Maybe some of those wouldn't necessarily go over well unless you are literally an undead thing that can rip off your own arms, but still, very, very well done subclasses that are really, really fun. I'm going to go over some of my favorite ones. This is a 100-page supplement, so we're not going to sit here and look at every single page or class, but let's do an example of the writing, because the writing in here is so well done, which is astounding that this is a 100-page book, and I was just hanging on every word that I was reading. It's incredibly well written, well edited, and makes me excited without being too verbose. So I'm just going to actually read you a passage from the introduction under Undead class features. This is on page 7. To better represent undead characters, Chapter 1 provides variant class features for each of the official D&D 5th edition classes. No longer does the cleric turn undead with their channel divinity. Instead, they turn the living. A fighter's second wind, closely tied to the idea of catching one's breath, is replaced with undead endurance, a method of recovering unique to undead creatures. Many class features are held intact as they don't conflict with your newfound unlife, but consider how the flavor of each feature might be affected. For example, does your Hunter's Mark allow you to track the target with ease through magically enhanced observance and keen wit, or does it amplify their unfamiliar breathing on the pounding of their heart as they flee? That's so, I flubbed a little bit at the end, but that's such a well-written 2 paragraphs that was explained what was going on, gave me examples of things I'm going to see, and made me excited to look at what's coming next and what kind of things we're going to be getting as undead character classes. So just absolutely very, very well written throughout. Really nice layout too. It's, I'm usually not a fan of the kind of black and white style, but this one has a kind of a gray and red style that really fits the theme nicely. And even though the art is mainly like shadowy and kind of black and white, there's that red popping that stands out, and it looks really, really good. There's one, there we go, this picture. I fucking love this picture. Really amazing art, and I do like the look of it. I mean, it's kind of a minimalist style, but that gray and red just fits very, very well throughout. So for examples of how it changes class abilities. So again, your race obviously changes to the undead version. You've got new undead traits there, but in terms of your class, what it does is it either modifies or replaces existing class features. And I think Paladin had some of the more, let's see, page 30, I had to write down because this book is big enough where I had to write information down. So the Paladin, obviously, in the living version of the Paladin, you have a lot of things about healing and dealing radiant damage and all that would be not well fitting with an undead version of a Paladin. So in this case, you gain Detect Life replaces Divine Sense. So now you can detect anything that isn't undead or a construct and isn't behind total cover. Death Shroud replaces Lay on Hands, which deals temporary hit points instead of healing. There's a lot of, all the spells give you, all the classes give you new spells, which are a lot of the basically necromancy spells, as well as you get Unholy Smite, which, as you can guess, deals, I believe, necrotic damage instead of radiant damage. That one's pretty easy, right? You're just replacing abilities fairly directly with the counterpart to the undead. And then when it comes to something like Bard, so now with Bardic Inspiration, there's an extra feature now where if somebody dies, when a creature's Bardic Inspiration die from you and reduces a target to 0 hit points or deals necrotic damage to a target, the creature can roll the die and regain that many hit points, called Hungry Inspiration. This allows you to kind of regenerate if you're killing people. And then Requiem for the Restless, I believe, kind of similar to the Paladin one where it does temporary hit points instead of actually healing. So that's kind of the way that they balance the fact that undead really isn't about healing. It would have been really interesting if they had gone even further with the undead thing and done kind of like what Divinity Original Sin does, which is if you are undead, healing spells straight up hurt you and you actually heal from poison. But I can see why they didn't want to go that far, because that would probably upset the balance of D&D without really having it been built for that from the ground up like Divinity was. So that probably would have been a little too crazy. So instead, they kind of re-themed stuff where, like, okay, instead of, like, healing, maybe you're gaining temporary hit points, or you're kind of doing a vampiric, like, sucking the life out of people or something, versus just straight up using healing magic. So I think that's probably a good way to handle that. So some of my favorite subclasses. So again, we've got all those replacement features built in that kind of re-theme your abilities for you, which is very handy to have. And then in addition to that, you've got special undead subclasses that you can take, which would then replace your current subclass with very, very inventive, fun ideas. Honestly, out of all of these, there were some that I really thought were amazing. None of them did I think were particularly bad or not well designed. There was just some that I was like, okay, that's kind of neat, and then others I was like, holy shit, this is freaking incredible. I'm going to go over the holy shit, these are freaking incredible ones. So, as I mentioned, there's the Barbarian Arms, what is it called? Path of the Grave. Sorry, Arms of the Grave is the ability. You can use your own body to fight your foes, ripping off limbs to use as weapons. So when you enter a rage, you use a bonus action to either rip off an arm or a leg. Again, you're just an undead corpse. You're like a zombie or something. So I just think it's hilarious, and what a cool idea to take advantage of the fact that you're undead, that you're just ripping off pieces of your own body and just beating people with them, which is absolutely hilarious. And this does a good job of front-loading the cool ability at 3rd level. And then as you level up in that subclass, you gain new abilities and that enhance that trait, that Arms of the Grave ability. So you might deal more damage with it, or you can have your arms like crawl back to you or something, which is pretty freaking hilarious. Like, all that is really, really neat. Let's see, the Cleric Death Domain. What shoutouts to this supplement giving a Cleric domain. Cleric is one of my least interested classes, despite it being such a strong class all the time in D&D, and 5th edition is no exception. Cleric has just never been of interest to me whatsoever. The idea of the holy tanky, archetype is just never a thing for me. However, the Undeath Domain, because I believe Death Domain is already a domain. The Undeath Domain, it has a really cool feature where whenever you or an undead you control kills a creature, so obviously Animate Dead is a big part of a lot of these spellcasters, you gain a little tiny spirit that floats around you and projects a 5 feet radius of darkness for each spirit, and you can have a number of spirits, equal to half your proficiency bonus. And then whenever you deal necrotic or psychic damage, you can send those spirits out to deal extra damage. So you have this whole extra resource system to keep up with. But it's a cool flavor. You've got these tiny little motes of darkness floating around you that can kind of expand this field around you, or you can send them off to deal extra damage. That's just a neat idea, a neat concept for any class. I was like, okay, Cleric, I see what you're doing here. That's kind of neat. The Druid honestly has, and by the way, most of these classes, all the classes have between 1 and 2 subclasses. Some of them only have 1, others have 2. I believe the total comes out to let's see, I wrote down over 20. I want to say it's maybe 22 total subclasses. The Druid has 2 of them, and I'm going to go ahead and mention a possible spoiler for our Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign, so mute me for the next minute or so if you don't want to be spoiled about that. Okay, are we done? All right, so the spoiler is that one of the Druid circles is Circle of the Host, which involves your body being a hive for an insect swarm, which is kind of similar to the Swarm Keeper. The Swarm Keeper, you've got a swarm outside that you control. This one, your body is literally you picture bugs just swarming in and out of your undead husk, basically. And I thought, what a cool idea to do that to one of our characters who has the host secret, which involves having a gestating bug larva inside of him. And I thought, okay, I'm going to start looking at this class and really deciding if I can use some of these abilities as he progresses in stages on his player secret, and maybe explode with bugs and maybe gain some of these abilities as a result, which would be pretty neat. Okay, we should be back now, but that's a neat spoiler thing, which means for the rare time I'm looking at a player supplement, I actually may draw something from it for our own campaigns, which doesn't really use third-party stuff, so that's really cool. It's a really neat ability. You can cast Infestation as a bonus action. You gain this basically you can turn on this swarm that swarms around you and causes to be heavily obscured by the swarm, and you've got all these, you can send out little bug spies and things. Very cool. And the other one is you turn into this fucking tree where you've got giant, your arms turn into vines that you can lash out. Just absolutely awesome. The Fighter, which is another one that the class usually isn't that exciting, although some of the subclasses are cool. And I think this one honestly has some pretty cool subclasses. Mainly the what is it called? What are you called? The Damned Hunter, because this one operates in an interesting dual mode system, which no other class does, and it's a video game thing that I think I love to see D&D take advantage of this, which is you're either in one mode or the other. In this case, you are either hungry or sated. You are hungry if you eat the flesh, which actually has to do with another one of our player secrets. Spoiler. You consume the flesh of a small or large creature that's alive within the past 24 hours. You become sated. You gain temporary hit points. However, if you abstain from that ability for 24 hours, you then become hungry. and you can add your Constitution modifier to the damage roll of a weapon attack once per turn. And the interesting thing is, all your abilities as you level up have to do with if you're hungry, you have this, and if you're sated, you have this. It's like you have resistance to one thing, and if you're hungry, you have resistance to the other thing. It's a really cool system to where you actually want to keep track of, what state you're in, and kind of work on that with your own, side system, which is really cool. You're also kind of like a Batman type character where you've got all these like special tools you can use that are unique to the undead, which is pretty neat. So I think that's a really, really cool fighter feature. That's a lot of fun. Another one that I enjoy, and again, these are just my favorites. None of these are particularly, bad. I think they're all pretty good, but these are just my favorite ones. Ranger, again, both of them are pretty cool. First of all, they get an undead companion, which is awesome. You get an undead little beast friend. The Life Chaser just had a lot of cool abilities to hunt down the living, which just feels like a very cool, like, instantly anybody who's undead would gravitate towards that kind of a theme, maybe, if you want to take, revenge on just the living, and all your stuff can, like, hunt the living. Osmosis Necrosis is a hilarious ability in which you actually siphon off healing from any healing magic that's cast, which is pretty funny. And then Light Trapper has an awesome ability where you can turn on, like, Wraith mode, and you can basically fly and then fly through people. And whenever you fly through people, you can actually forego your attack action. And whenever you just ghost through people, you deal damage that way, which is really different and crazy cool. You just turn on like this ghost mode and just fly through people dealing damage. That's awesome. Like, such cool ideas for being undead that really go well beyond like, okay, you're kind of a zombie with a sword. There's just a lot of really, really neat, cool features. The other one, the final one I want to look at is the Warlock. And again, none of these, and some of them do a cool job of having different kinds of undead themes. So like the Sorcerer Dryvane obviously is based on a mummy type undead creature. There's a rogue one that's about if you froze to death, then you become this frozen soul, and you've got all these kind of snow abilities. You can like disintegrate into a pile of snow or something. Really fun ideas across the board. And the Warlock specifically is all about summoning undead. And then when you use your Animate Dead spell, because that's one of the invocations you can take, and you can actually like use extra uses of spell slots and things to give that undead certain buffs. So you really become kind of the like necromancer from Diablo 2 or something at that point. There's also a really neat one where, maybe this is a feat that I'm looking at, but you summon some kind of a beast. Oh, where was that? I didn't write that one down. You summon a beast and you have to roll a bunch of d4s to determine what kind of monster it is. And you got to like pick its different head and its tail, and I think it might have been a spell. And you roll a d4 for all the different traits it has, and that's a really neat idea for like cobbling together a Frankenstein monster, which is really fun. So again, that's the majority of what this book is. That's 60 pages of new subclasses and replacement features having to do with undead. So that alone would make this an incredible book. That would be a super thumbs up, excellent recommendation. Even if you're not going to use undead characters, you could kind of see how some of those could be very specific subclasses with just a little bit of tweaking in order to flavor them for use as living characters. Or maybe you want to be like a half thing, like your Blade or somebody who's half vampire and half not, and you can get away with that. So just really fun ideas for one of the better subclass products I've seen. And that's not all, because then we still have another 40 pages to go with this supplement. Greater Undeath is the one where you can literally transform player characters into straight up like liches and vampires and ghosts, and basically what we would think of as villainous undead NPCs or bosses or monsters. So like Bodiless, you can straight up possess people. Death Beast is like a super undead werewolf creature. Lich, I'm sure we're all familiar with. There's literally rules for how to create a phylactery, as well as having your own Lich lair once you reach a certain level. I'm reminded of Acquisitions Inc. when they asked Jim Darkmagic, like, would you go, what is your plans for the future? Are you going to go Lich? And he's like, yeah, I'll probably go Lich, in the future, as wizards do. I think I'll go Lich. This is a way where you can go Lich. You can go Lich as a spellcaster. Now these have some prerequisites. It says you have to have a spellcaster that's able to cast a 6th level spell, for example, and I think you use like, so you can cast Soul Jar, and you have to spend like 100,000 gold pieces and be able to create your phylactery. Like, there are systems here in place. Yes, it's batshit crazy. It doesn't feel, extremely balanced, although I do think the designers did a pretty good job at trying to make it balanced. But let's face it, if you're going to let your player be a lich, you kind of know what you're getting in for, right? But it's a cool reward if your players are into that kind of thing. This could be a whole personal quest for them. And again, this speaks to the fact that if you wanted to, instead of having it happen to one character, who's turning undead, which I think is what you would use those first ones for. This section, maybe if you're running like a whole undead themed campaign, then I think you could start letting loose with letting your players really get crazy and all, being able to progress into these greater undeath versions of undead. But a ton of cool options for here. Revenant would obviously be a very popular choice for anybody, because you die, now you want revenge on who killed you. I believe it's a spell later, but they do straight up at one point have the Ghost Rider like penance stare, where you like stare at somebody and you make them like relive all their sins and stuff, which is pretty fun. I think that's a spell also. And of course, vampire. Morbid Miscellany includes the feats and spells. There are some feats in here, but it's mainly, which kind of draws from a lot of, like, you can do the Artificer skin grafting thing. It's a way to take subclass abilities and put them into other, anybody can take those feats. But what's really here are the spells. And folks, usually when it comes to the spells in these supplements, I'm kind of glossing over them. I'm saying, yeah, the spells are fine, because there are. There's not a lot of cool spell. There's so many spells available now. It's really hard to make me stand up and take notice and be like, oh man, this is a really cool idea. This has some of the best spells I've ever seen in a supplement. Straight up amazing. If you have any interest in playing a necromancer or death themed spellcaster, holy crap, this list of spells is absolutely incredible and well worth the price of admission for this supplement. Like, so much of this is based on cool things you can do with bones, especially. In fact, the wizard subclass, which I glossed over, is osteomancy, which is funny, which is all about bone magic. And so a lot of the new spells have to do with bones. You're drawing out bones from your body, or you're pulling bones up from the ground. A lot of them really feel like they're based on like the classic Diablo 2 Necromancer, where there's like a corpse explosion, or there's, hands coming out of the ground and grabbing people. One of them is like they come out of the ground and they charm people into coming over there, and then they grab them and restrain them, which is very creepy and cool. So I just wrote down like a bunch of notes. You can transform yourself into a super bone warrior. That's the abandoned flesh here, 9th level spell. There's a swirling bone cloud. You can create revenants out of dead bodies. You can straight up like whisper into dead bodies and be like, hey, don't you want to have sweet revenge on those who killed you? And that person rises as a freaking revenant. The Ghost Rider penance stare is here, called Hell's Regrets, which is pretty funny. There it is right there. You've got a corpse teleport, where you can teleport between corpses. You can summon an entire unholy chapel, which is the ossuary here. I just wrote down lots of cool bone-themed spells. Spinal Whip, Restraining Bones, Skeletal Wings. Oh, the summon Monstrosity is here. This is the one I was talking about. So this one here, you call forth the spirit of a monstrosity, and the corporeal form uses the monstrous spirit stat block. You roll a d4 for its body, head, tail, and breath weapon. And literally you just come up with this crazy cool Frankenstein monster. I love the idea that you don't know what you're going to get when you're summoning this monster. It's just going to be something absolutely crazy that's got all these different abilities. Just really, really amazing spells that actually have cool ideas. And 90% of them have to do with bones. So you're either drawing bones from yourself or you're summoning bones from around everything. And it really feels like if you wanted to play the freaking Diablo 2 Necromancer, or I guess Diablo 3 is a Necromancer too. I shouldn't harp on Diablo 3. This absolutely is the supplement for you. Like, just such cool bone-themed spells. You don't necessarily even have to be the undead, subclass to appreciate them. Just really, really fun ideas to where I actually sat here and was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have to read every one of these spells because they're fucking amazing. And there's such cool ideas throughout. So really, really cool. And then the final piece de resistance is Reliquary, which just includes kind of themed adventuring gear for undead that would really just make sense for the kind of stuff you would have, because you're probably not going to carry around like holy water and those kind of things. So a little bit of magic items as well that are kind of themed towards the undead. Just a little bit of a bonus for to have that. One thing I really want to call out that this book does a good job of is acknowledgements and a content warning table. So Acknowledgements, you know, in the past I've complained in these big books that have a lot of different contributors, they don't actually say like who contributed what, and that's something that's really nice to see, because if you end up really particularly liking certain, you know, subclasses, for example, then you can see which author attributed that and, you know, look them up and find out like, oh man, this person is just right on my wavelength when it comes to what I want from, you know, abilities and things. So that's a really cool thing to have, and I appreciate that a lot. And then the content warnings, you know, I've got folks saying, oh man, I wish, you know, we can't have dark stuff anymore. It's too bad that this is all, you know, kiddie rides and things. The way you can do that is through a content warning table, which is you just include, hey, this includes dark stuff, but we are acknowledging the fact that there's dark stuff in here. And this one actually even goes above and beyond that and says, here's the various pages in which you might run into some of the things like mentions of suicide or cannibalism or a lot of body flesh manipulation. Basically things you would find in horror. But in this case, it's attributed by page, which is just, it's hugely helpful. And for those that don't care and you say, I'm not offended by anything, good for you. You don't have to care about this. Like, it doesn't matter. But and for those that are, then you've got this page here. This probably should have been at the beginning. I don't know why it was inserted at the end, as more of like an index feature, I guess. But it's, you know, it's just nice to have. It's just a nice, easy safety tool thing to include for all products, especially one that's going to include some pretty dark, messed up stuff, even though it's all in good fun because it's D&D. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for playing Dead. Pros: variant undead replacements for all 13 classes. Some of them are pretty easy, like the Paladin just kind of replaces everything with, you know, necrotic damage, or you're healing with temporary hit points. But still, those rules are there. If you know, because a lot of the things wouldn't make sense, or, you know, and the cleric one where you're channeling, you know, you're not turning the undead, you're turning the living, for example. It's still nice to have those rules in there. Pro: over 20 new undead themed subclasses with 1 to 2 per class. We only went over like a fraction of them, and those were some of my favorite ones, but holy crap, there are some really neat ideas there that you don't even have to necessarily be undead to enjoy, but you absolutely should. Okay, here's the content warning thing at the beginning of the page. It's just not by page numbers like it was in the index, but it does mention a whole bunch of stuff. Pro: greater undeath rules and stats for transforming PCs into familiar undead threats. I don't know if I would particularly take advantage of that, because it does get kind of crazy unless you are running maybe an undead themed campaign. I mean, do you really want your player character to be a lich? Maybe you do, and in which case those rules are there and it's really fun. Like, you can be a vampire, you can be an undead werebeast. Like, those are all neat ideas, and there's a bunch of them that are for options, so it's cool to see that and read through it. Pro: over 24 deliciously dark themed spells. I cannot praise the spells enough from this supplement. And pro: the acknowledgement table and detailed content warnings is just hugely well regarded here. I didn't even include the fact that it's just expertly, brilliantly written and nicely laid out, because I've got a bunch of pros already, but it is. Like, it's a good looking product, and it's a very easy read. Despite being 100 pages long, it is a very easy read, which is a huge plus. Cons: did you hear me make a complaint ever in this entire review? No, you didn't. There's no cons here. This is a fucking amazing product that you should absolutely own. Verdict: with 100 pages of replacement class features, subclasses, feats, and spells for undead player characters, Playing Dead is a remarkably comprehensive and expertly written guide where death is only the beginning. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.